podcast, Lucado, tells the story of an old woodcutter who lived in a small village. Now, he was a poor man, but he had a beautiful white horse, envied by everyone, even the king. In fact, the villagers said, "Why didn't you sell that horse? You would have enough money to last the rest of your life." But he said, "This horse is a good friend of mine." He said, "It would be like selling a friend. It's more than just a possession." Well, one morning, he woke up and the stable was empty. And the villagers came and they said, "See, we told you, you should have sold that horse. Now you're poorer than ever. What a curse." The man said, "Why? Why do we call this a curse? It's just something that happened. Let's just say that my horse is gone and leave everything else up to God." Well, the villagers said, "It's a curse." Well, about 2 weeks later, this horse comes back, and with it brought 12 wild horses. So all the villagers gathered around and they said, "Look, what a blessing. You were right. This horse is back, and it brought 12 horses that you're going to be able to train and you're going to be able to sell, and you'll have more money than you need for the rest of your life." And the old woodcutter looked and said, "You've gone too far. Why do we call this a blessing? It's just something that happened. And we know that in all things, God will take care of us, and it'll be for His good and our good and His glory." So the villagers, of course, said, "No, it's a blessing." Well, his only son, the man's only son, started to train the horses and tried to break them. Well, one of the horses threw him off, and the boy broke both his legs. And so the villagers all gathered around again, and they said, "Look, what a curse. Your only son, who's the only person able to help you, is now hurt and injured, and so you're going to be poorer than ever." The old woodcutter said, "Why do we call this a blessing or a curse? It's just something that happened, and we know that all things work together for our good and His glory." Well, about a few weeks later, all of the country went to war, and all of the boys were called to the army. And so all the villagers gather around again, and they say, "You were right. This was a blessing, because now all of our boys are gone to war, and yours is safe at home with you." The woodcutter just shook his head. He said, "I'm done talking with you." He said, "Why can't we just say that your boys have gone to war and mine's home? Not a blessing nor a curse, because we know in all things God works for our good and His glory." You know, as we start this 2018, we need to have the attitude of the woodcutter, because lots of things are going to happen in our lives. And too often we judge them and say, "This is a blessing," or "This is a curse," when all we see is a snapshot. We don't see the full picture, but we know that God does. And we know that in all things, God will work for our good and His glory. You know, if there was one thing that was probably the greatest curse ever, it was when all the disciples were standing and they watched Jesus be arrested and beaten and crucified and died. And I'll bet all those villagers gathered around and said, "What a curse." But we know that Jesus did die, but He rose again, and He conquered sin and death to pave our way to eternity with Him. And so what we saw as the greatest curse actually became our biggest blessing. So during this community time, remember that sacrifice. And during this year, when circumstances arise, don't be too quick to judge blessing or curse. Know that in all things, God will work for our good and His glory, because sometimes the things that we think are our biggest curses actually turn out to be our greatest blessings. Prepare your hearts now as we sing.